Councilor Batey was born in Oklahoma and lived in a number of states and 3 foreign countries before settling in Milwaukee in 2022. Soon after moving to Milwaukee, she became an active member in the Island Station Neighborhood Association, in which she served variously as chair and secretary for several years, and on the Citizens Utility Advisory Board. Lisa subsequently served on the Planning Commission for 9 years, serving as chair for the last 3. She has been a member of the board of Celebrate Milwaukee, Inc., the community nonprofit that sponsors the Milwaukee Sundays Farmers Market. In 2018, Lisa was proud to serve as one of the founding board members of the new Milwaukee Parks Foundation. A lawyer by profession, Councilor Batey works for the federal government. But Councilor Batey feels that much remains to be done to improve the livability for Milwaukee's current residents, as well as those who might move here in the future, such as finishing Milwaukee Bay Park and other area parks, attracting new businesses to invest in our industrial and commercial areas, and establishing a robust emergency preparedness program. Improving public transportation options through creating a shuttle system connecting industrial areas and neighborhoods to light rail is important to Councilor Batey, as is the removal of Kellogg Dam and restoration of Kellogg Mount Scott Creeks to salmon-bearing streams. Such projects will require funds far beyond the city's budget capacity and are challenges she hopes the council will take to help Milwaukee become the more vibrant, livable place we all know it can be. Councilor Batey serves as council president from January 2015 to January 2019. On a personal note, Lisa inspired the Milwaukee Museum to have our first ever historic home tour in 2019. Her willingness to participate and be an active member of the tour enticed other homeowners to follow. Her dedication, not only to her 1912 home, but also to the preservation of buildings in Milwaukee, has created a true atmosphere of not only the benefits of preservation, but the contributions these buildings provide to our city's history and climate goals. One thing I can always tell you about Lisa is that she will listen to what you have to say. She will take in that information and she will relay it back to the council or to the people that should hear it. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Councilor Lisa Batey.
Well, thank you, Greg, for that very warm introduction. You reminded me of some things I didn't even remember myself. So, as Greg mentioned, I live in a 1912 home. I bought it in I moved here in 2000 and I moved to the area in 2001. I bought the house in 2002. It was my first home that I'd ever bought. I was a little past my 40th birthday, and the home inspector looked at me with kind of wild eyes and said, "This is not a starter home." There were a lot of projects. There was a lot to do to get the house with rotted fascias and rotted porch boards and all kinds of things back into shape. But it's been a labor of love, and I've really enjoyed doing it. And so anyway, that's my own story as to why I'm keen on historic preservation. I want to read a little quote that kind of picks up on some of the things that Greg said. Historic preservation is a conversation with our past about our future. It provides us with opportunities to ask what is important in our history and what parts of our past can we preserve for the future. Through historic preservation, we look at history in different ways, ask different questions of the past, and learn new things about our history and ourselves. Historic preservation is an important way for us to transmit our understanding of the past to future generations. That quote comes from the website of the National Park Service. And people probably don't think of the Park Service as a historic preservation entity, but it's a big historic preservation entity in our country. It maintains a lot of, important, historically important properties. So in Milwaukee, we talk a lot about climate. We have a climate action plan, and I think people think that historic buildings are old and drafty and really just need to be replaced with something more, with energy efficient. Well, the truth is, historic preservations are the greenest buildings we have. It's the ultimate recycling project, and the construction materials that were used in older buildings tend to be more durable. The work of refurbishing older buildings relies on your local craftsmen and your local people and isn't about just buying off-the-shelf parts from the Lowe's that were built in China or wherever. So I think it's really a fallacy in a lot of people's minds that I think a lot of people just don't realize that historic preservation is a green enterprise. It is the environmentally right thing to do in many cases. And one of my own stories, so in my house, I have the old windows. The guys come around to your door, you've probably all had it, where they want to sell you windows or they want to sell you siding. And I'm like, no, I'm not putting your aluminum siding on my 1912 house. And no, I know my windows are not the most efficient. They're that old wavy glass. But there are constantly people coming up with new things to help you make your home more sustainable. And one of the products that's been developed in recent years is called Indo, which is an indoor storm window. And instead of replacing these beautiful old windows, I could just get fitted these indoor storm windows that I pop in for the winter, I pull out for the summer. Much less expensive than replacing all my windows and, preserving the historic integrity of the home. So turning from my own story to Milwaukee's story, Milwaukee's way behind on updating our historic preservation code. Yes, we have one. We have an inventory of buildings. We have two lists. We have the significant and the contributing historical properties. Those haven't been updated since the 1980s. We're really behind. It's a thing I bring up every year when we talk about priorities and things that need to happen. And we redid our comprehensive plan a couple of years ago, and it does call for us to update all of that. But it also calls for us to do a ton of other things that we have to update. And so historic preservation is still a few years out on the to-do list for the staff. But I think we're at an important juncture here where it's becoming more important because we did recently just enact new housing code that is allowing for middle housing. It was mandated by state law, but it was something we were going to, do anyway, but sort of the scope of it and the extent of it was mandated by state law. And so now we have, the ability for homeowners to build a threeplex, a fourplex, cottages or townhomes on their properties. And I think that creates more of an incentive where we are more likely to see some of our historic homes removed for that kind of, those are just going to be financial decisions that I think people will make. And so I do think it's important to move more quickly on our historic preservation work. At a recent city council meeting, Mr. Heemer offered the museum's help in updating our historic inventory. And I do think, I think that's a great idea. I don't know that we have to wait for the city. I mean, why can't we start, if we have people who are interested in that kind of work, why can't we start building our own list of homes that we feel, and it's not just homes. I do focus on homes because Milwaukee is largely a residential community, but we do have buildings that we should think about conserving in our downtown and in, other commercial areas and possibly in industrial areas, although I can't really think of one in the industrial areas. But anyway, why can't we get a head start on what the city will eventually do so that there's a list for when the city turns to the work for them to start with? So if anybody out there listening to this is interested in helping with that kind of work, or if anybody just lives in a mid-century, I do want to say a little bit about mid-century homes, because our list hasn't been updated since the 1980s. In the 1980s, mid-century homes were only 30 years old. They weren't eligible, they weren't thought of for historic preservation. So we have a lot of cool mid-century homes in Milwaukee, because the 1940s and the 1950s were a big building boom in Milwaukee's history. So if anybody out there has a mid-century home they want people to know about, or they want to get on the radar screen for some protection, if anybody wants to volunteer to help with this kind of work, please contact Mr. Heemer at the museum. You can also contact me through the city's website. You can find my email, and feel free to contact me as well. But I would love to create a team of 4 or 5 people who would like to just start in on the process of identifying and listing homes for us to think about as we approach historic preservation in the coming years. So I do think, anyway, I've given my pitch for mid-century. I think that's what's the big gap in our inventory, but I think there are other eras and other buildings too that warrant some attention and some scrutiny for the gems, the sort of little hidden gems that they are. And with that, I will thank you very much, and I look forward to what I'm going to learn here. So thank you.